Hello everyone, Shalom Alechem, it's Zara, I'm back. I'm trying so hard to finish out this Gregorian year with actually um, posting more videos and getting back into it. I have all this stuff in my head and then I'm like, oh, I'll make this video, and then I never do it, and then 4 months go by and I'm like, darn, I never made that video. So anyway, I'm as you guys know from the title of the video, it's a little clickbaity, not really, but a little bit. I'm going to be talking about the pagan literature, or without the air quotes, the pagan literature that I do read, and that I've started to almost study, and why I do that. And I know, just as a disclaimer, if you are someone who's like a baby to the truth or in this walk or in your faith, or whatever, you just don't have that foundation. So maybe you're not new, you've been in there for a while, but your faith is just not strong, and your foundation is not strong, at least in in Torah, or in his word. Then I'm going to advise, if you will, that maybe you don't look into this stuff until you get to a place where you know where your foundation is. Of course, everyone has their own journey. I am not saying don't read it if you don't know exactly what you believe about everything. I wouldn't feel right if I didn't put that out there, because I don't want any of this, because it is stuff that goes directly, in some ways, against what the Bible teaches, such as monotheism, or maybe this, depending on depending on what you believe, this pantheon type idea. But whatever, it's still talking about the worship of other gods, which we are forbidden to do. So I wouldn't feel right doing the rest of this video if I didn't at least try to put that disclaimer out there, that if you're someone who's prone to worship other gods, or you're not careful about that, then maybe this isn't for you. But I did want to make this video because I think so often, especially over here in the West, in America, and with evangelical Christianity and Protestantism kind of dominating our thought when it pertains to the Bible, especially when we talk about Yehoshua or Yeshua, Jesus Christ, whatever, Isa, whatever you call him, that we only hold to these 66 books, and then we do so in a very Protestant or evangelical way. And I think for so many people, it's a big jump to even think back to like an Eastern Orthodox understanding of the text. But then from that jump to even go to a completely Hebraic understanding of the text, ignoring a lot of that Greek influence, is even bigger of a jump. And so I'm going to make another leap back and say, you know what, like, we are real people. Everyone here may not be Jewish or an Israelite, or whatever term you use to identify yourself ethnically with Am Yisrael, with the nation of Israel. But if you identify that way by faith, that's fine too, in my book. And so we were a real people back then, just like we are now, and just like we are real people now, and we have experiences, and we have a culture, and we have different beliefs and things like that per community. It was the same way back then. And so I started to think, as I was reading, I keep up with the Torah portions to the best of my ability, Bezrat Hashem, with the help of God. And I was reading the creation narrative, and I started to have so many questions. And of course, I read Jewish oral tradition, so I do read the Mishnah, I read Talmud, I read these other works, and I read these commentaries to help me understand what I'm not seeing being said that could be being said there, right? And the more I did that, the more questions I had, and something just sparked in me, and I said, hey, I wonder what the other side of the story is. And so I started to read from the Israelite Samaritan Pentateuch. I don't know if I have that yet. I think I've shown you guys this here before, but I started to read the creation narrative from this book, And not that anything was like super crazy different, but it did give more details, as well as the assatir, so the oral tradition that goes with it. And it was talking about these angels being involved in creation and kind of their roles and their duties. And so, of course, that took me into some other, Christian writings. Of course, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jasher, Jubilees, those sorts of things. I was going back through those. And again, I was still like, okay, there's other people, other nations and kingdoms being mentioned. What's their side of the story? And so, and because I was noticing that Torah was mentioning, not by name, but was mentioning these other gods. And I was like, well, that's so weird. Like, I just had thoughts like there's other gods that exist. Of course, we don't mention their names or speak their names, but they're mentioned. And there's this type of like war in a way going on. But then there's also this understanding that there are technically no other gods. Like, what's an idol? It's nothing, right? There's no power in it. So I just started to get curious. And so I found the Enuma Elish. And the Enuma Elish is the Babylonian creation epic narrative that comes out of Mesopotamia. And it talks about one of these other gods by name, which I won't say, but it starts with an M. And it just goes through like, it's truly like an epic story. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's one of those things where you're reading it and it's like, is this like, it feels like you're reading one of those like fiction books, like those sci-fi fiction books. And it's like, it's really entertaining. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's really, not cool, but like it's interesting, like how they tell the creation narrative. And there's so much that overlaps, but then it's the other side of the story, almost like the other side of the story from those who worship this other god. And so then I started to go back into Torah and compare and contrast, and it was almost like how we have received the Torah. It was specifically guided to be written for what our nation needed. I think it's obvious, anyone who truly studies, it's not an exhaustive account of every little detail that happened in creation or even the next 900 years after creation. It's telling us what we need to know. And so for me, that's where my faith is. That's where I put my hope and my trust in, is like, this is what I'm supposed to know. This is what I need to know. This is what I can trust to be trustworthy and true. And then the other stuff, I'm like, yeah, maybe it's true, or maybe that's what happened, or these things, could also be true, but it's not so much about me. Sorry, I have something in my eye. But it's not so much about me believing in it as it is about like just getting that information and just saying, okay, like this is the other side of the story, and this is maybe a possibility of what could have happened, just concerning the flood and things like that. And so the Enuma Elish is something I actually think everyone who's like, if you're really going to be like, I'm a Bible scholar, and you're like deep in your faith and you're all strong in your faith and you really want to contend for the faith with other people and like be able to kind of hold your own in those conversations, it's, to me, it's like I don't like not knowing things. Like, if I'm going to be talking to someone about something as personal and important as your faith in Yah, as your faith, your faith in the Most High God, I want to be able to meet people where they are. So I want to be able to have some sort of understanding of their beliefs in that literature. And of course, for us, being Israelites, we were sister cultures to all these people groups, the Sumerians. You know, like, we were in Babylon for a very long time with those people, the Akkadians, like all of these other people groups, which brings me to my next point and my next book that I got that I've been slowly reading. Obviously, we were close to Egypt and the Egyptians. And there's a verse, I should have had it written down, but I wasn't thinking, in Isaiah. And yeah, Isaiah 19:25. And it was one of those verses that just has always, not that it's bothered me, but it's just been one of those things like, I'm confounded. Like, I don't know why this is there. I don't know why it's saying it. But it's been that thing like that you just put in the back of your head and you're like, I'll get that when it's for me. But Isaiah 19:25, it says, let me find a version I like, ESV. It says, "Whom the Lord of hosts has blessed, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people." Like, or what? I'm sorry, I thought Israel was the only people that were your people. But it says, "Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance." Like, of course, there's a whole context to that, so don't just take that as a standalone. It's talking about this future time. But it's just like at any point when he's calling Egypt my people, like, and these other nations his inheritance. I don't know what to do with that when, of course, what we've always kind of taken is that Israel is your only people, right? And so anyway, I obviously when you study Torah, you notice that Israel and Egypt, they're like always got this thing going. And so Egypt is significant. I think sometimes it is synonymous with like ratchet, bad, don't do it, run away. But that's not always the case. And there's a couple other places in scripture that I'm not going to bring up right now, but that kind of talk about Egypt not in the way of like totally wrong about everything. It's just simply like, don't do what you see them doing. Don't take on those customs. But then we know that some of the burials of our patriarchs were done in the way that the Egyptians did it. So anyway, the next book is this bad boy, The Literature of Ancient Egypt. I just got this maybe a week ago from one of the used bookstores that I do frequent. And y'all, it is like, it's a lot. And I'm not one who's ever really looked into much of this. I've just never been interested, and now I'm getting interested. But it's got like everything in here. There's multiple parts. Part 1 is narratives and tales of Middle Egyptian literature. Part 2 is late Egyptian stories. Very interesting. Part 3 is instructions, lamentations, and dialogues. I've found some of that stuff in there to be interesting. Part 4 is from the religious literature. Part 5, songs and royal hymns. Part 6, the royal stelae. So you have the Semna stela listed under that, the Neferhotep stela, the Kamos text, the poetical stela of Thutmose III, the Israel stela. So I read that. I need to like reread it because sometimes I read things and I'm like, what does this have to do with Israel? Like, why is it named this? And it's really just me being slow and not having enough like ancient historical knowledge of those people to really make the connection. So I'll have to like really look into that again. The Bentresh stela, the Victory stela of Pi, the Famine stela, and the Satrap stela. And then part 7 is autobiographies. Part 8, scribal traditions. And then part 9, the demotic literature. And some of that's like the magician stuff. So I probably won't read all of it. Like I am sensitive to kind of like that dark, kind of spooky crap and like that witchcraft and that magic-y stuff. Like I have no interest, and I feel like it maybe introduces things into your home that I don't want in my home. And so there are things that I will be probably skipping over, but the stuff that's more just like their religious literature that they wrote down in their records of their belief and their stories, like I don't mind reading that. And so I am like getting more comfortable, clearly physically right now, but I'm getting more comfortable like branching out and reading things that I probably normally would never like look at. And I think so far it's really just enriched my own faith and helped me to be like, okay, I totally understand why when I read about this story in the Torah, the Most High, kind of instructs Moshe to skip over some of this, right? To get rid of some of these things. And some people would say not Moshe, but even Ezra the scribe, when he did rewrite, like the Torah, so that we had something that, we know that he did make edits. And so as I read, I'm like, okay, I can see why maybe you took some of those names out, or maybe why it's so clear to like only worship one God. Like I can definitely see why. And that's been really beneficial for me. So, if any of you guys have any other recommendations for these pagan ancient literature for me to maybe pick up and read, definitely leave those comments below or email them to me if you don't feel comfortable leaving those comments below. I understand that too. Let me know if you guys have read these texts, because I'm actually interested to see like how many of us have kind of like read those things. I know when I posted the pseudepigrapha video, a lot of people were like, oh heck no, girl. So I can imagine this one would be maybe controversial, even though it's not really meant to be super controversial. I just like getting on here, talking to you guys, seeing what you guys are reading, how you guys are doing, in your faith walk, in your journey, and just checking in with you guys about my own. So anyway, I hope to see you guys. Leave some good gems in the comments, and hopefully I shall talk with you guys more next time. Emir to Hashem, if Yah wills. Bye everyone.